Hello, hello. This is Jazz Cole from Multilingual and Philanthropic Incorporated, and here is another video for you this week. And this is talking about making your transition from learning a language to actually applying it to abroad experiences. And this is something that is really important. So I want to be able to help you to get off Duolingo and actually start learning and applying what you know and learning more, because even as a French-speaking person, because French is my OG foreign language, is you learn more every day, especially if you're not a native speaker. You learn so much more and newer information every day that you're interacting with the language. So I want to basically give you ways to prep if you are studying abroad, moving abroad, I don't know, like working abroad. I don't know what your reason for traveling abroad is, but I want to give you some things to really keep in mind as you are transitioning from a learning environment to actually applying it into real life situations. So let's get to it. Depending on where you're going, this is really going to make a big difference. So if you are learning, let's say French, for example, and you are going to Paris, for example, you're still going to meet people who are from different dialects. There are people who are from different African countries that speak French as a first or second language. You might be exposed to people who are completely from another different side of the world, such as Canada. I remember when I went to a church in Paris, one of the pastors there, he actually speaks in what I recognize as a Canadian accent, because I recognize the accent because I had a roommate in college who was from Quebec, and it's like you get this, when you listen to it, you get this feeling of, I think that's French because I know something, but then you're not always sure because certain words are not the same. So in those situations, textbook, Duolingo, things like that, they will not teach you how to read different dialects and different accents because it's completely different. I think it is great if you are trying to build a strong foundation of a language. I think you should know how the rules work before you get into more advanced content. But I'm going to be honest with you, once you learn the fundamentals, you can pretty much just throw it right out the door. Because when you get to this different country, it's more of like, they could be, depending on where you are, it's going to possibly be different. I would just say, like, with regional accents and dialects, because of the fact, for example, with the French language. In France, it's even different because France, for a long time, even though they spoke French mainly in like the northern part where Paris is and Versailles and the northern part of the country, but for the longest time, people didn't, like, outside of that little realm, didn't actually speak French, and they actually had to come up with a public school system so that everyone was speaking the same language. It's like, this is France, and a small part of the country actually speaks it. So that's why, depending on where you are going, you might hear an Occitan accent. There's Breton. Even like in the south, there's some parts that are influenced by Catalan, because that was once a language that was spoken there. So you're gonna see these little accents that are coming up, because also accents in the north of France, that's typically what a lot of people learn. That's actually a completely different accent from the south. Because, like, I remember I was watching one of my favorite reality TV shows is Maman est célèbre. I talk about this a lot on social media, but it is a very fascinating series. It's very fascinating. Yeah, it's for celebrity moms, but like influencer moms. And it's like basically like perfect for like millennials, like in their target audience range. But there's one of them, she's from Toulouse, that's like where she lives. That's where she lives. And her accent is very distinct. It's like compared to the others that live in like Paris, there's like another one that lives in like Switzerland. Then you have like another one that is living in, like there's a few that live in Dubai, but they're mainly like have French roots. One of them is actually Italian, but somehow speaks French, and that's just her, what she is. That's her main language now. I don't know. Those are just things that you just notice. Yeah, but depending on where they are, you're gonna hear language sound completely different. I also will just say, even like with Canada and Belgium and Switzerland, these are French-speaking countries that actually have more than one language as their official language. Like Belgium, I know that I've been to Belgium, and it's like, depending on what part you are in, you'll see different they have all of their signs and things like that. I've seen in like all three, from French, Flemish, or their version of Dutch, and then German. So you'll see them in all those different formats, but you'll hear people speaking a different language in that particular country. And sometimes because it's different, like for me, I can identify an accent from Canada, because also like with Canadian French, because there's an ocean that separates them, and the accent is actually very distinctly different. It's very distinctly different. It's hardly hard to miss. African accent, like African countries that speak French, you can generally hear it as well. I will just say Belgium and Swiss, for me, is just difficult to distinguish because the accent sounds similar. It's just more, I think, for me, it's more of recognizing the vocabulary of how they speak. That's just my main issue. That's my main issue. And even just looking at other countries, like for example, with Italian, like even though that is like the main language that is spoken in Italy, if you actually go in and look at it more specifically, there are different dialects and there's different like local languages that still exist. Like I know that there's like Sardinian, there's like another language, I think it's called Napolitana. I forget what it is. There's a really good video from LanguaFocus, which is actually linked below. They actually are a very good YouTube channel that explains the differences and like linguistically with all these different languages and the part of the different countries. But I have to really say, it's just that like in my case, I may be thinking that I understand Italian, but then depending on where you go, you might hear people speaking like local dialects. Like even one of my friends and my former roommate, she was from Italy. She was from like a place that's like 10 minutes away from Venice, just to give you perspective of where she is geographically. She says her parents can speak the local dialect, but they didn't teach it to her and her sister. So it's like she speaks Italian, but also there's also ways of it's kind of like how in the United States, how for me as an American, I mean, I don't really think of myself as having an accent because I don't hear it. I speak the way I always speak. But generally, you can always tell how like people are, like where people generally are, even in our own country, based on how they speak. You can tell if someone's from like the New England part. You can definitely tell if someone's from like New York or like Connecticut or Boston or something like that. You can basically, tell if people are from the South. You can definitely tell if people are from like like California or like the Western, because I don't know, West, they have like a specific accent that's different. We notice it. As an English speaker, I can basically tell the difference between many other English speaking accents. So like, I would say, even though we're all speaking the same language, we can just tell based on how it sounds. So even like going back to that Italian example, you may think, oh yeah, I know Italian, but then you're going to probably be in situations where you're not actually speaking Italian around people who are speaking Italian 100% of the time. So that's like something I think is very important to prepare yourself for. And even like, for example, like with minority languages, like for example with Catalan, which I actually have taken up as an 8th language. It is very similar to Spanish because not only that, my goal is not necessarily to be fluent in that, but if I end up being in Spain, specifically in those areas like Barcelona, Valencia, like the Catalonia area, then most likely I will encounter Catalan. So for me, it's important to be able to know how to recognize it and also make some connections. And also, even if you're trying to learn a minority language, for example, like let's say you have a relative that speaks it or that used to speak it, or it's a part of your heritage, I recommend that you should learn the main language before you move into minority languages. Like for example, with Belgium, I know that they speak a specific dialect called Flemish. I hope I'm using the right term for that as a dialect. They speak the same language as the Netherlands, but the only difference is that it's Belgian, like it's Flemish, and not Nederlandisch, like, So on that note, it's more of like, okay, well, there's not a whole lot of resources maybe for Flemish. So what I would end up doing is just learning Dutch first and then transitioning into like being able to identify the Flemish accent. And there are plenty of resources on YouTube that will be able to tell you the difference in those cases. So like going back to even what I was saying like with grammar, because depending on where you're from, grammar is just not going to be great. There's a really good book that I recently read. It's called WTF by Olivier Magny. He is French, and he actually wrote this book in terms of explaining to non-French speakers how their culture and their language works, and it's not always great. He was saying that if you've taken a French class, you will learn how to speak better French than the actual French. And I will be honest with you, that is even true in English, because I was editing a video and I realized that I said something that was grammatically incorrect. We do that in English too. So you can learn grammar, but you just basically throw it out the door. Because sometimes, like especially like with like languages that have like genders, sometimes you get it mixed up. One of the things I always do, and this is a tip for anyone learning a language, if sometimes you're not sure of genders, what I always do is I just say the words really fast to where you can't like hear which gender I'm talking about. It's like you just go over context. If I didn't know that like un livre, like it's masculine, a book is masculine, then I basically would just say un livre, like just say it quickly so that hopefully they'll catch the context of what you're saying. And I found out that I'm not actually the only person that does that. So if you do that, actually put in the comments, like tell me, like, or even like this video if you do that, But it's more of like, I don't know if this is the correct gender, so I'll just say it quickly and hopefully they got the context. So I honestly would just say it's important to make sure that like, even exposing yourself to the fact that it's not gonna be cookie cutter. Like I just said, I love Maman est célèbre, and sometimes I'm listening to it or like I'm watching it, and even if I don't understand all of I understand what's going on visually, but sometimes when it comes to the language, I have to like pay attention to like how people are, because it's just that it may take a while for me to recognize that this is French, like this is well, I know that it's French, but to recognize what these words mean. Sometimes it's actually subconscious where I actually don't think about it and like, oh, they said this and whatever it is. So sometimes I subconsciously, like I'm watching it and I automatically understand. Other times, depending on my mentality for like those different days, I'm just thinking, what are they saying? Or like I'm like translating. So stop translating. But, I would just say, like, first and foremost, just get off Duolingo. That's not going to help you in the long run. It's great to start learning, but the more you start, like, learning and, like, you want to be exposed to how people actually speak, because otherwise you just know how to speak these generic sentences and you're learning it without the nuances. And also I recommend that you check our website for a lot of our language learning resources so that you can actually expose yourself to things based on whatever language you're learning. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope this is really helpful. I hope this helps you in your career endeavors. I hope this helps you in your travel adventures and so on and so forth. I'll see you in the next one.